Okay, so I kind of roasted these late yesterday, so I decided, you know what, I'm going to store them in the fridge, and this is how I stored them. I just kind of flipped it back into, the pumpkin and just put it on a smaller baking sheet into the fridge overnight. You don't have to do that. You can do it the same day. It's just I sort of ran out of time, but here we are. So to give you a more accurate recipe, I am going to weigh the amount of pumpkin that's going into this. And you definitely can make your pumpkin butter using already like canned pureed pumpkin. Oops, that's okay. So I have 1.192 kilograms of roasted pumpkin. So I have around 2.5 pounds of pumpkin. Around 2 to 3 cans of pumpkin puree would probably work for this recipe. I'm also going to be adding a cup of water to a cup and a half of water to get things pureed in my blender. I'll be using 2 teaspoons of fresh lemon juice, a teaspoon of coarse salt. If you are using fine salt, maybe a half teaspoon of fine salt works for this. I'm also going to be using pumpkin pie spice, and if you don't have pumpkin pie spice, it's a combination of maybe around 1.5 teaspoons of ground cinnamon, clove, ginger, and nutmeg. So you can find the happy ratio that you like in your pumpkin butter. And to sweeten this, my choice of sweetener is piloncillo. This is evaporated cane juice, and it's in this really hard, cone-shaped block, or not block, but I'm going to actually, you can chop it or grate it to get it to fall apart. And if you don't have piloncillo, another thing I like to use is dark brown sugar or light brown sugar. And probably start with a packed cup and work your way up from there according to how sweet you want this. A lot of the taste in your pumpkin butter is going to be how sweet you like it. So I'm probably going to use, this one is 8 ounces and I think this one is like 7.5. So I would say start with a cup of packed brown sugar if you don't have piloncillo and work your way up from there as you're mixing. Okay, so on a side note, I went ahead and grated, well actually my husband did, he helped me. This is the grated piloncillo and I measured out 2 cups, which gives me around 300 grams of piloncillo that I'm gonna start with. And just, I have some extra, and if I need to add more, I will. So kind of like what I said earlier, the sweetness is really up to you. Start with about 300 grams or 1.5 to 2 cups of brown sugar and just give it a taste, and it might be enough for you. So I'm going to start with 300 grams of the piloncillo, and if I need more, I'll add an extra 50 to 100 grams more. I'm just going to taste it. Okay, so I'm going to puree this in batches because my blender cup is not that large. So I've added half of my roasted pumpkin, and I'm going to add a half cup of water, a half cup to 3/4 of a cup. And then I'm going to puree well. Okay, so I'm on my second batch of pureeing my roasted pumpkin, and I realized when I was pureeing it, I definitely used a lot more water than 1.5 cups. So for the amount that I'm using today, it took about 2.5 to 3 cups to puree this. But it also depends where you are going to puree it. Maybe in a food processor, it would require less water, but my little blender here, it needed more water to get going. So I'm gonna go ahead and add my salt, my lemon juice, my pumpkin spice. And the pumpkin spice, like I said, it's really up to you. I'm gonna start with a teaspoon. I'll do 1.5 teaspoons. Yeah. Okay, so I have all of my pumpkin puree in my pot. I'm going to turn on the heat. I'm going to use a low to medium low heat. This is a smaller burner, so I probably can use a medium low heat. Nothing on high, because this is going to take a lot of stirring and time to get to where you need this to be. So I am going to add my piloncillo that I've grated. And I'm starting with 300 grams. That would be around a cup and a half of light or dark brown sugar, like packed cups. And I'm just going to give this a really good mix. Let the piloncillo kind of melt down and combine with the pumpkin puree. And I will give it a taste. And if I need more pumpkin spice, I'll add another half teaspoon. If I want more piloncillo or sweetness, I'll add more. Now, the sweetness, the type of sweetness you use, some people use honey, a combination of honey and regular sugar, dark brown sugar. Some people like to add, instead of like, for example, how I pureed it with water, you probably could add a little bit of apple juice or apple cider to it. There's so many ways to, you know, create the flavors in your pumpkin butter. So I'm just going to let this kind of come up to a gentle simmer and continue mixing. Okay, so it's not quite at a simmer yet, but I'm going to adjust some of the flavors. For example, I am going to add another half cup of that piloncillo. So just check the description below this video to see what I added to my pumpkin butter. I'm going to give that a mix. I'm also going to add 2 more teaspoons of fresh squeezed lemon juice. Basically, I juiced 1 small lemon. That was enough for this. And I'm going to add another half teaspoon of my pumpkin spice. I think I want more. There we go. And again, the name of the game here is combine, mix, and simmer. Now, once I do get it up to that gentle simmer stage, I'm going to let it cook over a low heat, continue to gently simmer for about 25 minutes, 25 to 30 minutes, and you'll want to stir throughout the process, just so nothing burns on the bottom, which is another reason why you do not want to crank up the heat to high, because it will burn. So I'm just going to keep stirring, combining, tasting, and adjust it. And you know what? While I'm at it, another pinch of salt. And that's that. Okay, and I wanted to show you, I'm like halfway through the simmering process here. If you need to step away for a second or a minute or so, keep it on low, but make sure you cover it, because you see it starting to bubble and pop in here as it reduces, and that could be a huge mess if you walk away just for a minute and it splashes everywhere. So make sure you keep a lid on it if you need to walk away. But I'm gonna just let this simmer for about another 5 minutes, give it a stir, cover it, and hopefully within the next 15-20 minutes it'll be done, and I'll show you kind of how it reduced. Okay, so I actually let this go longer than 30 minutes only because I kind of did a large batch today. I am going to adjust the recipe in the description below with a smaller amount, maybe using only 1 pumpkin, or you could probably use like 1 can of pumpkin puree with this. But anyways, I did make a lot today. I'm probably gonna have to go give this to like a neighbor, give them a jar of this. But this is done. It's reduced a lot of the water content that I added to puree the roasted pumpkin. It kind of cooked out, and as this cools and sets, it really does become like that, you know, a butter consistency. It gets very thick. So I'm gonna let this cool. I hope you give this recipe a try. I hope you like it, and thanks for watching.